This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day, everyone. We're coming on the air with breaking news right now. Bill Cosby, once one of the country's most beloved and successful entertainers, has just been sentenced moments ago in a Pennsylvania courtroom. This following his April conviction in a sexual assault case. That case brought on by former Temple University women's basketball director Andrea Constand. More than 60 women have come forward in recent years to accuse Cosby of sexual misconduct, but the Constand case is the one that led to a trial, a conviction, and now a sentence of Cosby at the age of 81. Let's go right to NBC's Stephanie GOSK, who has been covering the Cosby trial and has the latest from outside the courthouse in Norristown. Stephanie?
Lester, Bill Cosby, the man once known as America's dad, has been sentenced 3 to 10 years in a state prison. This comes after not just one trial, but a retrial after a hung jury. The judge saying that no one is above the law. What's interesting in this sentence, Lester, is that the maximum would be 10 under Pennsylvania law. The 3 charges of aggravated indecent assault merge into one. So that would be the higher end of the sentence. Also, because of the way Pennsylvania law works, because it is 3 years, he will not be let out on bail during the appellate process, which means effectively he will be leaving the court today and going straight to prison. Of note as well, his wife, Camille, who has at times appeared during this trial at his side, has not been with him during this sentencing hearing, clearly knowing that there was a possibility he would be going straight to prison. Lester?
So you say, was there another option, a county jail, or do we know for a fact it'll be prison?
Well, the defense was asking for house arrest. That was actually what they were asking for. The judge clearly deciding that he was not going to do that in this case. And there's precedent that back when he committed the crime in 2004, it would not be an option for someone guilty of this kind of crime to be put under house arrest. That law was later changed. But no, Bill Cosby going to state prison.
And preceding this sentence, the judge declared that he was a violent sexual predator. What does that mean in practical terms if he's going to prison? Does that really fall in line once he would be released?
It is, and it's an important designation, this sexually violent predator designation. It then means that he has to register in the sex offender registry. That is a lifetime registration. As a sexually violent predator, he has to check in with state police quarterly. He has to show up at a police station, take photos, and confirm that he lives where he lives. He has to get counseling. If he moves residences, he has to alert the police, whether that's here in Pennsylvania or to another state. He also has to tell the community around him as a way of warning. It is, in effect, as you know, Megan's Law, it is about community safety. Lester?
All right. Have people started to file out of the courthouse yet?
At the moment, they've not started to file out, but I can tell you, Lester, that it has been, in turn, very emotional over the last couple of days. That in addition to Andrea Constand being in court, there were a number of other accusers, some of whom, and I've been covering this from the beginning, some of whom have been here for every step of this process. We have seen tears, we have seen hugging. They have told us repeatedly that really this case was a symbol for all of Cosby's accusers, many of them not able to bring their charges to court because of statute of limitations laws. They see this case as being representative of them all.
All right, I've been looking at another monitor here, a camera inside the courthouse that appears to show the courthouse security taking up positions as if people will be coming out soon. There will no doubt be a lot of emotional reaction. We saw certainly after his conviction some months ago that emotional reaction that Stephanie GOSK noted. Again, 3 to 10 years. The sentence, 3 to 10 years in prison. The sentence handed down just a moment ago in Pennsylvania against Bill Cosby. And as Stephanie noted, he will be taken into custody and straight to prison. We'll have full details when we see you tonight on NBC Nightly News. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News, New York. Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.